We're here at the 2012 Agora conference, and I'm here with Dr. Thomas Kidd from Baylor University, who's going to be speaking to us in a little while on Patrick Henry. The theme of this year's conference is Christian faith and politics. So, Dr. Kidd, what can Patrick Henry teach us about the relationship of Christian faith to political involvement?
Well, you know, there's a lot of discussion about the role that faith played in the American founding, and I got interested in Patrick Henry as somebody who really, when you look at the span of the major founding fathers, Patrick Henry is one who's just very clearly a committed Christian. And so I'm interested in looking at the issue of what role did his faith play in the founding for Patrick Henry. And he has many disagreements with other founders about the role that religion should play in American public life. Patrick Henry believes that Virginia, for instance, should keep having a tax-supported state denomination even after the Revolution. Madison and Jefferson really disagree with him on that issue. So there's just fascinating issues about the role that faith plays for somebody like Patrick Henry in the founding of America.
Now, was your conclusion that his motivation for political involvement was different from many of the other founding fathers, or would it be similar?
Well, I think that all the founding fathers live in a world that has a lot of fundamental kind of Christian or Judeo-Christian assumptions about our rights come from God, morality and ethics and virtue are really important. But I think that Henry is a little different because he has a background in the evangelical revivals of the Great Awakening in the mid-18th century. I think he learned to speak partly through the influence of the pastors of the Great Awakening. He has this incredible dynamic speaking style that even his critics would say that he sounded like a preacher. And Jefferson, Madison, people like that didn't really have that kind of influence. And I think it does give him a sort of passion and zeal that the revolution, the founding, is something that God will bring us through if we just have courage and stick to the principles of the Bible and this sort of thing. And so I do think that his faith makes a big difference in his political career.
What would surprise us about Patrick Henry? We have a popular conception of him. We know a little bit about him, perhaps, in the popular consensus. What is it that you were surprised by, or that we would be surprised by in learning about this man?
Well, so many people know only one thing about Patrick Henry, and that's the Liberty or Death speech in 1775. And then I think that Henry tends to fade out in our memory of the Revolution. And I think one of the reasons for that is that after the Revolution, Henry gets into very deep and sometimes bitter conflict with some of the other Virginia patriots, especially Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, over two main issues. One is religion in public life, and the other is the issue of the Constitution. And he and Jefferson in particular, Jefferson comes really frankly to despise Patrick Henry as a political enemy. And we don't usually think of the founding fathers as having these kind of bitter rivalries, but they really did over some really basic issues of applying the revolution in American life. Now, should we continue to have official state denominations like we used to in the colonial past or not? Should we have full religious freedom? Should we have this new Constitution that Madison frames? Patrick Henry becomes the leading opponent in Virginia of the Constitution, which seems surprising to a lot of people. Patrick Henry's this great patriot. Why doesn't he like the Constitution? I think that's fascinating. And so I think what's surprising is how much he disagreed with other leading Virginia patriots.
And have you found that studying the founding generation, Patrick Henry in particular, but others as well, their understanding of the Christian faith and politics has affected your own understanding of how Christian faith relates to political involvement or activism?
Sure. I mean, I think that they live in a world where they can assume that there's a consensus, I think, about the importance of things like virtue, as they would say, or morality and ethics. Even someone like Jefferson, who's more skeptical than some of the other founding fathers, I think assumes that in American public life we have to have a commitment to basic concepts of morality, ethics, and virtue. And I think that, so even the ones among the founding fathers who are not necessarily personally devout, they understood that for a republic to survive, that we have to have some kind of moral consensus in America. And of course, these are exactly the kind of issues that are so fraught and difficult for us in American politics today. It's the social issues, it's the values issues that are so difficult. And I think when you go to the founders, it's really a different world where there's so much more consensus about those kind of issues. And it's a real challenge to us today as Christians, as believers, to know how to engage in a public sphere and a public debate where there's not as much consensus anymore. I think that that's a very demanding and challenging issue for us politically, to know how to understand the realities of the diversity of American public life today and yet still have a Christian witness for those kind of important moral and ethical issues that we want to defend.
Well, Dr. Kidd, we look forward to your time with us today at Cairn's Agora conference. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.